The deep state. What does that mean? So folks on the left, and I'm talking about guys who write for the New Yorker and the Nation, they make fun of it and say, oh, this is just a conspiracy theory. This is the sort of ravings of Steve Bannon trying to stir up people on Breitbart, et cetera, et cetera. Well, let me be very clear. The deep state is the same thing that President Eisenhower reminded people about when he talked about the military-industrial complex. So if Eisenhower's warning in the 1950s was something we should take seriously, well then certainly 60 years later, we should be taking it seriously. And so there is this complex, right? There is a professional strata of people in the DC area principally who run the government day in, day out, frankly, decade in, decade out. And they're the professional staffs that man all the departments and agencies in town. And those folks don't roll over too often. They're usually there locked in for a 20, 30-year career. They're the folks that are really the deep state. They are the long-term career professionals who do all the heavy lifting at all these different agencies. And so when you have a new president or new administration elected, they can have all the greatest ideas in the world and they can staff the senior leadership of their department or agency with their folks. But all the people doing the work one layer down, they may not necessarily cooperate. And they don't have to do it obviously. An example would be the acting Attorney General, Sally Yates, who violated her oath and did some horrible things. I can discuss that in detail. But it can be other people who just sort of passively non-comply. They sit in their cubicle and they don't put out the memo they're supposed to, or they don't follow up with the email. And so in each of these ways, there's sort of this incremental chipping away at the legitimacy of President Trump and his administration. Because the people will say, well, gee, you can't get things done. Of course you can't. If half the workforce is actively non-complying against you, those are the sort of frustrations that an administration has to deal with. So how is it that I can say that so many people at headquarters and different departments and agencies here in DC are deep state operatives? And I don't mean that in the sense of it's all a coordinated, synchronized, finely tuned, sort of machine. It's not. It's just a group of people who cling to a general ideology or a viewpoint that is anti-Trump or counter-Trump. I think sometimes people on the left who want to make fun of the notion of the deep state cartoonishly make it simplistic, and they offer this additional level of, hey, you're saying this is all synchronized, this is all directed and ordered? Baloney, it isn't. It's just people who are long-term leftist operatives manning these agencies, not cooperating. So 94% of the District of Columbia, of the voting bloc there, voted for Hillary Clinton. In Prince George's County, just outside DC in Maryland, it's something like 89%. And then across the river in Arlington, Virginia, I think it's 87%. That's the workforce. Those are the people who day in, day out live and work in the DC area and take the train or drive into the city and operate in these agencies and departments. So if that's your workforce here in Washington, DC, and they're controlling the day in, day out sort of administration of the government, what do you expect when you have somebody come into office who's not a politician, who's not a lawyer, who's never held elected office, and is really pretty much a self-made man? And he's not terribly beholden to anyone or any party. And so, I mean, arguably the president is a Republican. That's the ticket he ran on. But really, is he some rock rib, hardcore, Jesse Helms Republican? Not in the least, right? This is something completely different. And he's a guy who really has already set out this idea that he's going to break China. He's going to rough things up and turn things over. And that just intrinsically, inherently violates this notion that somehow the status quo is going to be achieved. If Trump succeeds in sort of revolutionizing Washington, there's a lot of people who'll be out of work, right? The gravy train dries up and all the usual business stops. So whether you're a lobbyist or a defense contractor or you belong to one of these DC think tanks, your bread and butter is the status quo, the normal, regular things proceeding as is. President Trump comes in and says, no, we're going to turn everything upside down. And that terrifies these people because they are swamp creatures, okay? They are the creature from the Black Lagoon. And in this case, the notion that somehow you're going to deprive them of their operating environment and reduce their resources, it's terrifying to them. So all the RNC operatives, the Never Trumper gang that got swept into the White House with Reince Priebus, they're sitting there in the White House. They didn't have some sudden miraculous conversion. If you want to look for leaks, I'd start there. Those are the people I think who are most likely to undermine the president because they want to return to the good old, bad old days and an old boy system of patronage and paying dues and gaining access. And President Trump and his administration, in large part, break that.